Okay, good afternoon. So we are now finally starting the presentation for today. We're going to have first presentation by Ms. Acem that is working at the assistant as the Leibniz Master Course in Ecology, and we are preparing a summer course for this summer, and she will be presenting it shortly. And then we're going to have a presentation by our invited scholar for today. And I want to say to all of you that are assisting here and also that are assisting through the web page that we have that is again a great pleasure to have you all with us. And then please, if you want to also make some comments or some questions, you can use Facebook to do it even during the presentation. So I'm just presenting Acem now, and then I will present the next speaker after Acem talk. Okay?
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. So let me make a little presentation of the current event that we're going to organize in July. So the UNESCO, the International Centre for Coastal Ecohydrology in liaison with the University of Algarve and the Centre for Marine and Environmental Sciences are promoting a summer course in ecohydrology, which is called From River to Coast. And the aim of the summer course is just to simply understand to provide the understanding of main ecological and hydrological processes and how they are affected by the for example, in the river basin from upstream to downstream, and how they are affected by human activities and climate change, and how they interact in time and in space, and how they can be managed successfully. The course will be held in different locations. So you see in south of Portugal, so of course accompanying the river coast gradients. So the classes and the field trips will be held in the Guadiana River and at the dam of Alqueva, and of course you will visit some adjacent coastal zones. Moreover, I would like to say that the course will be of 12 days, and it will be uninterruptedly. So it will start from the 23rd of July and end on 4th of August. So for getting additional information you can about the application form and about the deadlines and about the inscriptions, early or late inscriptions, so you can just follow on the web page. So you see the web page www.ecohyd.org, or you can directly contact me via email. So you see ecojanova@ual.pt. So one more thing that I would like to mention, which is really important, is that it's for you, especially students, that the international experience is the impressive part on your future CV. And of course, taking into account your personal growth that comes with overseas, traveling, but being able to include your study at some additional courses, like courses in ecohydrology or summer courses, or being the alumni of the summer course will really help you to be or to stand from the crowd, to be distinctive among others. So I would like you to join the summer course and have a nice time and have enormous experience with the course. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Acem, for this very convincing presentation. And now we are calling Dr. Milena Arias Schreiber, and Milena is now working at the Instituto in Bremen, Germany. And she's from Peru. And the work that she does is very interesting because she has a very interesting background because she's a marine biologist that then turns to policy. So, as we all know, very good scientific ideas need to have governance above us to decide and to implement very good solutions even when we find them, which sometimes is really difficult. And so she is making this bridge, which is more and more important to have this relation and this interdisciplinarity between natural sciences and social sciences. And therefore, I think we're going to assist a very interesting presentation about Peruvian fisheries, governance, and climate changes. Thank you so much, Milena, for joining us and for being with us, and wish you a good presentation.
Yeah.
Okay, position your lapel as close as you can. It has a spring. On the floor. Or even inside. Your pocket.
Yes.
Because
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your invitation. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Second time in Algarve, but first time here at this university. And the presentation today, as Luis mentioned, is about governance institutions for sustainable fisheries and climate change adaptation. And I have a case study with the Peruvian anchovy fishery. Oops. Okay, first a very short introduction. What is governance? The action, manner, or system of governing. Governance refers to the formation and stewardship of the formal and informal rules. I will explain that later. That regulate the public realm, the arena in which a state, as well other factors like economic and societal actors interact to make decisions about management of resources. According to Elinor Ostrom, she won the Nobel Prize in 2011 in economics. The most simple system of a natural resource is composed by a subsystem called the resource units, the resource users, and the resource governance. So, in the case of fisheries, we have fishery system, we have the resource units, the fish, the resource users, the fishermen, and we have the resource governance. So this is all the whole system, and if we want to see what happens with the system, we should be able to know what happens in the three subsystems. That's why we also want to go to the resource governance subsystem and look what happens there. Is there another way to go faster here?
Left, the left. You're pressing the right, the left button.
Switch the microphone more.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
So these three subsystems, they have different factors affecting them. For example, the fish will be affected by climate change and pollution. Fishermen will be affected by market prices or unemployment in the fishery sector. And resource governance will be affected by political changes at national level. Wars, for example, will affect the resource governance, who will send the fishermen to war, for example, and who will affect the amount of fish left in the ocean. Just an example. And, okay. And different people working with these subsystems. We have the fisheries biologists working with the fish, the economists and anthropologists working with fishermen, And we have the political science, and this is a sociologist working with the resource governance subsystem. What is the difference between management and governance? According to Olsen, management is the process by which human and material resources are harnessed to achieve a known goal, the sustainable use of the resources in this case, within an institutional structure. And I want you to remember this institutional structure, because I will talk about it in a minute. Governance, the contrary, sets the stage. It's more ample than management. And it's used by defining the fundamental objectives, policies, the laws, and institutions, again, by which societal issues are addressed. Oh. Okay, what are institutions? I mentioned in the last slide that management and governance, they are like regulated by these institutional structures. And institutions are the conventions, norms, and legal rules of a society. They provide expectations, stability, and meaning essential to human existence and coordination. There's a big misunderstanding about institutions and organizations. Institutions are not organizations. The confusion comes when you think about the Institute for Research, and then you connect institute with institutions, but institutions could be organizations, but are not necessarily organizations. Institutions, if you think of just that word, is how things are done every day in a certain society. Examples of institutions could be marriage, shaking hands when you know a person, create an expectation, you know what you expect if you meet someone, having breakfast, you don't have to think every morning when I'm going to have my meals, you know that you will have breakfast, and restaurants will open for breakfast. Even the use of Google, there's no law saying you have to use Google, you just do it. Or even an old woman regularly sitting in a cafe every day. You might hear something like, oh, she's an institution. So it's regular patterns that keep society together. But also an institution could be a church, kingship, a parliamentary systems. It's just the way the society works and what keeps together the society. If you think of an ecosystem, you notice that there are relations between species, there are competition, there are many things that keep the ecosystem together. So you can do a parallel, more or less. All what keeps the ecosystem together, trophic levels, all the things in the society are the institutions. The ways things are done, sometimes they are legal, they are called formal institutions, they are laws that allow you just to drive on the left or on the right, they are laws, but they are the rules that you have to follow to be and have some pleasure to be inside a society. Now I'm going to go to my case study. Why do I study the Peruvian anchovy fishery? Peru is up there, South America, and the east coast of Pacific South. It's almost 10% of worldwide marine fisheries landing, so it's quite a big important fishery. It's the world's largest monospecific fishery. 99% is just one species. Has been also described as the most sustainable fishery worldwide by a study comparing 52 fisheries around the world. Very important here, 90% of the landings are processed to fish meal and fish oil, so it's not for human consumption. There are around 1,200 fishing vessels from different capacities, 140 processing plants to transform the fish to fish meal, 23,000 employees, and in 2008 the exports reached 1.8 million tons, valued at $1.6 billion for 1 year. That's quite a lot of money for the developing country. The management system, not the governance system, the management system is responsible of the Vice Ministry of Fisheries since 1970. There is a Peruvian Marine Research Institute responsible for research and monitoring. It's part of the study of the state, sorry. The management tools they use is total allowable catches. There is a catch set every year. There are closed seasons. Spawning seasons are not allowed to fish, for example. Fishing gear restrictions, size measures. Temporary closure of fishing ports in response to high juvenile bycatch. That's quite important as well. And coastal zone protection, 5 miles offshore. This fleet is not allowed to fish, and they leave that because this is a big commercial fishery, and there's also artisanal fishermen who said, okay, we want some rights here, and they gave, the state gave them these 5 mile zones protection. Okay. Here, the landings. Historical landings. The fishery started more or less in the 1960s and has been some up and downs, but last landings are more or less sustainable at between 6 and 10 million tons of fish. That's quite a lot of fish. I mean, this fishery can fish in 1 day, 1 or 2 days, what countries like, I'm not sure about Portugal, but countries like Panama, Sweden, they fish in Germany, but they fish in those countries in 1 year. This fishery can fish in 2 days. So it's a big amount of fish. There's another reason why we started the Peruvian anchovy fishery, because you saw the landings. We can divide the historical landings in one unsustainable phase at the beginning of the fishery, who finished with the collapse of the fishery during the 72-73. Then the collapse phase, then another big extreme event, the El Niño 82-83, and then the fishery started to grow again, and now we could say it's on a sustainable phase, except from this green going down during the El Niño 97-98, and I will explain in a minute why that happened and why it recovered so quick from this big impact. So it has gone through unsuccessful and successful phases, permitting comparison. You can say what was happening during the unsustainable phase and what is happening now. Now, what are the changes? What changed? What institutions were created? Yeah, that was the idea, to explore what happened and try to understand how can you bring some lessons to other fisheries who are in the same problem of collapsing, for example. So the first question we had is, what is the role of formal institutions of the laws, the fisheries laws? Why do we have fisheries laws? What laws are enacted to solve problems. So can a law solve a problem of unsustainable fisheries? And if not, what is the role of law in fisheries governance? Why do we have fisheries laws if no one seems to take care of them? So that's the first paper as a result of these questions. And what we simply did is we plot the landings of the fisheries, and we put the 3 fisheries acts and see if just visually you can say that the law made a difference. And the first law was quite disappointed because the fishery collapsed after the first law was enacted. So it didn't help at all for the results. And the second and the third, we were not sure. We thought that the third could have a quite different impact and provided some help for the sustainability of the fisheries, but we were not sure. So what we did, is we compared the 3 laws on the structure, comparison of the structure, and well, the first one had 129 articles, and the new things that are not in the other ones are underlined. Foreign capital guidelines was something that we never found again. The second one had aquaculture. Oh, the year is not there, that was 1992. Our aquaculture was starting to develop, so they have an article about aquaculture and fishing products. The third one, 1994, they have fisheries management, and we thought, okay, maybe here is the answer why the things improve after this law. Fishing by foreign flag vessels is new, institutional coordination. So we had some hints saying, okay, law could have helped at least to promote the sustainable fisheries. But again, we were not sure. And we used what is called the legal clinic. It's developed by Winter. He's a lawyer, and he works with fisheries. And what he did is he made, at the end of his book, he made a list and said a sustainable fisheries must have these points. So there are, in total, they are not all shown here. There are, I think, 60 requirements he mentioned. So if you want to have a fisheries law that will promote sustainable fisheries, you have to have all these points. And we gave some grades to this every point. So if the Peruvian law had the first requirement, we put 5 points. If it was touched but not really, we put 3, and so on. And if this requirement was not mentioned at all, we put a 1. So in total, you expect for the perfect fisheries law, you expect 300 points, and we got 129, 156, and the third, again, some improvement, 207, but it was very, for us it was still quite a big difference between 207 and 300 points. So we wanted to look, not the structure, but the contents. And that was the key of the thing, because the first fishery law, it was enacted by a left-wing military revolutionary dictatorship in the country. And Article 4 says we want national involvement and we limit foreign participation. So we want this fishery to be for the Peruvians. And the goal was the Peruanization of the industry. Then the second, from 1807, was political change again in the country. It was a left-wing populist social democracy. And he changed this article and says, okay, we promote the involvement of any kind of property or company organization. Everyone is welcome, but they could be in harmony with democratic principles. And the third law, the 1992, Again, very early in the statements, Article 3, this was a right-wing neoliberal dictatorship, so the law underlines the promotion by the state of foreign investment. We want everyone to come and hear, foreigners are welcome, this is all open for everyone. So we weren't very happy with those results. And so, okay, fisheries law is doing something, but let's have a look at secondary legislation. And we plot surface temperature anomalies along the whole story of the fishery. So the red ups are warm waters invading coastal Peruvian waters. And the line is the number of regulations setting the quotas for the fishery. And we were very, very happy to find the last bit, because it was the only bit when you saw that number of regulations, number of quotas declared, were in response of changes in the temperature. So the management, the governance system was reacting to the environment. You don't see the same patterns before the sustainable phase of the fishery. And this is evidence of adaptive management in this sustainable phase. I will talk a little bit later about this as well. But please keep this in mind. Okay, some conclusions about this work. Fishery systems are ruled by human-created laws on top of laws of nature. You have your laws of nature, you have your El Niño, you have your currents. On top of that, you have human-created laws. And the whole system has to adapt to all these laws. Fisheries acts in Peru are enacted independently from the state of the fisheries. These acts reflect national political changes. However, fisheries acts promote sustainability only by clearly establishing who can participate in the fishery at international levels. Between the Peruvians, there are no problems. I mean, it was an open access. Every Peruvian has the right. But the law will say, we want only Peruvians, we want transnational here, or we want some mixture, but some social democracy, some the state regulating this. And the last conclusion, secondary legislation should be flexible to allow adaptive management related to sustainable fisheries. Okay, now I'm going to talk about another topic. We bring to another topic, which is institutions to cope with environmental variability and climate change. What are the practices, conventions, etc., informal? Now we are going to deal with informal institutions that have developed to cope with extreme climatic events. And actually the question is why the fishery recovered after the 1997-1998 extreme INSU event. If you... Okay. Okay, how are we coping with environmental variability? These fisheries bears, at the beginning, bears seasonal variability. Winter months are bad months for the fishery, and that was not expected, that was just noticed during the very, very early stage of the fishery. This is 1959 to 1964. So the fishermen knew, the first things they noticed is that winter months were bad months for the fishery. And they were very clever because they knew the state was going to put a closed season. And they went to the government and said, look, we don't have good landings during the winter. Please put this closed season during the winter. The lucky thing is that during these winter months, the anchovy spawns. So the researchers were so lucky to say, okay, it's going to be perfect. August, the winter months, anchovies are spawning. We want to protect the anchovy spawning. Let's close the fishery during the winter months. And everyone was happy. And they did it, and until now, this regulation is on. So they closed the fishery during spawning, during winter months, where the landings are small. This fishery also bears interannual variability. There's these enso years, which come in intervals. Nobody knows when El Niño will come. If you ask the fishermen, they will say, the only thing we know about El Niño is that some year it's going to come, and you don't know if it's going to be intensive, you don't know if it's going to come in winter, you don't know if it's going to last for 2 years or just for a couple of months. Quite a lot of variability. But we had in the history of this fishery 3 big extreme events in 1972, 73, in 82, 83, and the third one, 97, 98. The third type of variability on top of seasonal and interannual, there is what is called multidecadal variability or regime shifts. And that was discovered more first through paleoceanographic data. We have an upwelling area here in Peru, and the bottoms are anoxic, and you can put some sediment cores there, and you can see different scales deposition. And they found that there were different periods when they have anchovy scales and then sardine scales, natural. Many, many years before the fishery started. So that those are natural regime shifts. And we have seen along this fishery history 2 of these regime shifts. The first one during until 71, it was all anchovy. Then the system changed, and it was all sardine. Not too many, but it was all sardine. And then from 85 again, we have anchovy again. Those are natural changes. And they do not have now strategies to cope with this because it was just discovered in 2004. I know that they are thinking about it, but what I'm going to talk here is how do they cope with these interannual variabilities, with extreme enso beds. So what happens when El Niño comes? Oceanographically, biologically, it's all very studied and known, how the currents come, the warm currents come very quickly, and all the ecosystem changes. But if you ask the fishermen, they will tell you, we don't care if the temperature rises from 3 or 4 degrees. What we care is that our target species disappear. Number 1. Number 2, that we have invasion of tropical fish species. Number 3, our management plans, our quotas, our fishing seasons, they are no more valid. The whole system changes. And number 4, the prices of our products change, have price fluctuations. I will explain that in a minute as well. So that was, we made interviews to the fishermen, and they said that that's the things that happen to us when El Niño comes. Okay, what do you do? For the migration of target species, these are the landings during El Niño years, before El Niño years, and after El Niño years. These are by latitude, how the landings changed. So in 1972, it went a bit down. In general, it goes a bit down. The landings concentrate more to the south. But actually, there's no pattern. Whatever thing, I already mentioned, every El Niño is different. So it's very difficult to see what's going to happen when El Niño comes. It's all a bit unpredictable. So what they do is they have built all the fish meal companies. For the fish vessels, it's not a problem. The fish vessel can travel from the north to the south. It will use more petrol, but still it's not such a big problem. But the companies, we have now 5 big companies working in Peru. They all have one in the north, then go down and go down. All the companies, look here in the south, every company has factories all along the coast. So if El Niño comes and the anchovy moves to the south, they will work with these fish meal plants. If El Niño is not so big and the fish goes up again, then they will use the factories that are in the north. The other thing that they do is that they couldn't have money to build ports in all these places. There are some big ports where you have where you have infrastructure, where you can land your fish. But what they did is they create these unloaded platforms. This is just a platform on the water, and the vessels come, and they have some pipes here, and pipes coming from here to the factory. So they don't need to land actually on Earth. They just send the fish from these unloading platforms. This, just to show you that this is, should be very common in other countries, but this is Namibia. Their fishing processing mills are just in 2 main ports, in almost the same distance as in Peru. And this is the Gulf of Mexico, where also fish meal is processed. It's not so bad, but it still is concentrated in very small. So the day they have to cope with big environmental change, caused by climate change or whatever, that they're going to have big problems in landing the catches in other places. So to show you how this works, from these platforms, those are the pipes to connect from the earth, from the desert, Peruvian is all desert, to the sea. So the fish comes along these pipes and turned into fish meal. The fish meal they can stock, and then they use the main ports to export the fish meal. Okay, the second problem they had was the arrival of warmer water fish species. And we can see here that during the first big El Niño, it was almost all anchovy, Leibniz anchovy, and some species came in 72 and 73, but not so much. I said again, every El Niño is different. In 82 and 83, anchovy was already not quite a lot of the biomass, but other species, like mackerel, for example, invade these fishing zones from the anchovy fishermen. And the same in 1997, anchovy reduced and other species appeared. So what can they do with these changes in composition of biomass? These are the landings they did during these years, and all this went to the fish meal processing. So fish meal processing, they said, in comparison with human consumption industries like canning or frozen, has a major advantage of being independent of only one fish species for its production. So the problem is, if they use all the anchovy for human consumption and El Niño comes, and you don't have, okay, you can have jack mackerel, you can use that to feed people, but you have long-nose anchovy. That's a fluffy fish. No one is going to eat it. So the industry will have big losses. But what they do is they use all the species that come, they put it into fish meal, and the pig or the poultry who is going to eat this fish meal is not going to say, oh, I don't want this one because it's done from horse mackerel. They just eat the fish meal. So they can, even if they have a change in the biomass distribution of what is in the sea, they can still work with the industry. The problem was in 2007, the law prohibited the use of human consumptions for fishing. Because Peru is obviously a poor country, and it was seen not very nicely that these fishermen were using horse mackerel sardines to feed the fish meal industry. The third problem they had is that the management plans were no longer valid. So if you have new conditions at sea, you need more monitoring, you need to send more, to carry out more research, to send more vessels to look what's happening. And the research institute didn't have the money. They cannot predict when such an El Niño will come. So the budget said you have this money and suddenly you need to do some monitoring, extra monitoring. So what they did is the researchers talked to the fishermen and said, okay, we will use your vessels to do monitoring. You give us your vessels, we go sail in your vessels, we do our oceanographic samples, and we'll do experimental fishing, and we want the data, and you will be able to sell this fish. So for a fisherman who is not allowed to go fishing when El Niño is there, it's some entry of money. They were very happy to do that. And they started in 1966, and they are still doing it. I mean, this Marine Research Institute, they have budget to carry out 2 research annually, but when they see there is something strange in the sea, they called the fishermen and said, let's do one of these super operations. They're very happy to do it, as I said, and actually they draw lots to see which vessels are going to participate. The other problem with the management plans are no longer valid is that you have to, when El Niño comes, you have sometimes just 2 months to change the whole system. So you have to be very, very rapid to change the rules. So Peruvian General Act requires the use of marine resources according to management system based on management plans. And there are management plans for the Guyana squid fishery, for tuna fisheries, for jack and horse mackerel, for the mersal hake, but they don't have plans for the anchovy fishery. Anchovy fishery is managed according to something called provisional fishing regimes. They are enacted without any approval of the parliament or of the president. They just need the signature of the Minister of Fisheries. And that's the way they are able to do things very quickly. So as an example of how quick they go, this is a ministerial resolution 2010. It says that there has been a monitoring from the Marine Research Institute between 1st of January and 23rd of March, and they said they are juveniles bycatch. That was a report sent to the ministry on the 23rd of March. On the 24th of March, all the legal documents were signed and things, and the regulation came up the 25th of March. So they need just 2 days to close the whole fishery. And that's quite rapid. If you think about how long it takes here in Europe for the European Commission to change one regulation, first they have to put all the people together, they have to bring all to Brussels and all the costs and involved. It's not going to be less than 1 month until you have regulation. This regulation is published on the 25th of March, and the fisheries close on the 26th of March. Okay. The fourth problem, and I'm going to finish in 2 slides, I think, it was that fish meal prices is a commodity. Fish meal is a commodity, and when you have lots of fish meal in the market, the price should go down, and if you have less, the price should go up. So when you have an El Niño situation, your prices should go up. But what really happens is that people doesn't buy fish meal and they go to soybean. Because it's too expensive now and I can use soybean. So at the end, the fish meal prices does not depend on the balance between demand and offer, but on soybean meal prices. So during the 1990s, the fishermen called this period of the industrial conversion in Peruvian fish meal processing, and they changed the technology. They create a new fish meal, it's called prime steamed fish meal, which has 62% of protein, is much better quality and cannot be compared with soybean. So if you see the graph, they were always the prices between soybean and fish meal until April 2000 here, they start to decouple. So now they do not depend anymore from soybean meal. And they can play with the price of the fish meal independently from other prices of other communities. This is the last one. Okay. Commercial pelagic fisheries in Peru have developed strategies to cope with extreme ENSOs, which led to sustain a substantial reduction of economic losses during the 1997-98 event. Feeding fish, poultry or pigs with fish meal is, at least for Peru, an alternative under future climate change scenarios and until there is no significant change in strong cultural human consumption habits. In the face of sea surface temperatures increments in currently pelagic fishing grounds, governments should be prepared to be flexible and change their fishing regulations rapidly, adaptively, and according to strong scientific and monitoring efforts. To alleviate the impact of future uncertain climate scenarios in economic activities, other human-induced uncertainties should be reduced or eliminated. This last sentence is very strong belief in this fishermen. They always said we cannot do anything to change the environment. We depend on the environment. We depend on storms, on currents, but if there's something that humans, like market prices, are impeding our industry to come up, we won't allow this. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. Very interesting. And I think we got a broad view of Peruvian fisheries Now it's important to regulate them using all the tools that are available, that include not only scientific tools but also policy aspects, which are very important. I would like to ask if there is any. I would like to ask if there is any question to Milena. Okay.
Thank you very much for your interesting presentation. I would like to know if you could explain us how the fishermen are engaged in management of the fishery.
Yeah. Yes, co-management, I suppose, is the question. Co-management is when you include the stakeholders and take the decisions. And that should be promoted, really. The idea is that if you create your own laws, then you will comply with what you say. So involve the people in creating all these informal institutions. What we have there, first of all, I don't want to give the impression that everything works perfect in this fishery. They are sustainable, but there are some bad things and good things. They have the most powerful fishing companies. They have a lot of power in the decisions of the government. Through lobbying, sometimes they are already in the ministry. So it is almost a decision of the big companies, and they are reflected in the legislation, for example. There are always conflict with small companies, and it's not. They have biological sustainable fisheries, but socially, it's another story.
Any more questions? If not, I have one that goes to what you just told. I would like to ask you that in Europe we have these compensation measures when there is a closure of the fishery.
Yes.
So some money is available for fishermen. I saw that you closed fisheries in 2 days in Peru. There is any kind of compensation measures, also the financial compensation to fishermen, or how does it work? They accept very well that you can just close it like that.
They just accept. They could go to other ports. They just close the ports where they are bycatch. They could go to fish in other ports. They move a lot, but they know that fishing juveniles they do not. They have learned from the unsustainable period. They said we were catching 1 million juveniles on these years, and we don't want to do that. So they just accept.
Thank you. So if there is no more questions, I want to thank you again. I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank also for the people that are assisting through our webpage, and especially to our students in Kiel, in Łódź, and in IAG in Delft, that I wish all of you a great weekend. Thank you so much, and have a nice day.
Thank you.